Good morning, Chairman. We're now live.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning to everybody. Before we start, could I welcome Chris Hitchens, who is the chairman of Border to Coast, our limited company. Chris will be maybe chatting later on, but he's going to sit with us through the actual committee itself. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Eddie.
Hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Councillor Strickland.
Bit of housekeeping before we start. As you know, there are fire escapes on both these doors and behind me. There's no fire alarm expected, but if one goes off, then you know the drill, I'm sure. If not, follow me out. I'll be the first through the window. Okay. Mobile phones on silent, please. And if you do wish to speak, raise your hand and you put your button on. The light will come on. Make sure you switch it off when you finish speaking. Thank you very much. Item number 1, apologies for absence. Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Young, Steve Larter and Roger Buttery.
Thank you. The second item is declarations of interests. As you know, on your DPIs, you will have declared any interest, whether that's pecuniary or otherwise. If it's something that you wish to declare, please raise your hand and I'll welcome you to speak. Councillor Mark Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm in receipt of a LCC pension.
Thank you. Tom Hodgkin.
Yeah, I'm an active member of the fund.
Thank you. Any others? If you feel you need to raise a declaration later on, feel free to do so when that item comes up. Moving on, the minutes of our meeting at our last meeting on the 21st of September, you will all have read them now, so I don't wish to go through them item by item, but I will take you through page 1 of the minutes of the last meeting, page 2, 3, 4, and 5. Could I have a proposer that they're a true record of our meeting? That's Councillor Mark Allen. A seconder, Councillor Tom Smith. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Those that were there. Any against? Councillor Dilks, were you? You weren't there. So abstentions, yeah, that's what I'm after. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Moving on then, item 4. Now, the independent chair of the Lincolnshire Local Pension Board is not with us today, as you know from the apologies, but we have Dave Vickers, his vice chairman, who's going to give us the next part of the presentation. Dave.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, I'm not really the vice, if I may say, Chairman, but I've been on the pension board and been the scheme member representative for probably 10 years, so it's not a role that I'm unfamiliar with. I am a little bit unfamiliar with giving Roger's paper presentation, but I intend to be brief, but just to take you through what we talked about on the 13th of July, which was the last board meeting. We always have quite a wide-ranging agenda, and we often have sort of speakers who come and talk us through things. So we usually have West Yorkshire Pension Fund with us, and on the particular meeting, we took us through the TPR dashboard, the administration report, the data quality report, and we considered that at length, and regretfully in my case I was personally absent as well, so I was not so well that day. But in looking back at the meeting, the dashboard, we felt the TPR dashboard is a very important document for the pension fund. We've I think we're doing quite well with it. The issue for us is always, I think, on the training. Training and knowledge is probably one of the challenges that we all face. I mean, it's as much now part of the committee responsibilities as it is the board to be as knowledgeable as we can be. I suppose as well, I was surprised when I got told after the last board meeting that Hyman's had replaced the Lola training plan. We're going to have to effectively restart from scratch. I know that, excuse me, I know the chairman has, we've considered that at length. We also talked about the pensions administration report, and we were a bit disappointed to find that some of the key performance indicators were not as perhaps as good as we've seen in the past. We made quite a few representations, I think, about how are we going to improve on that. The reassurances are that obviously there was vacancies and that was going to be filled and addressed. I think we've got that to look forward to in at the next meeting. The data quality report, we still are, I think, a little bit uneasy with that, albeit we're doing pretty well. The 87% or 88% sort of score is still a bit concerning. I think from where I come from and from where Roger Buttery is the chairman, I used to be a trustee of the private sector scheme, and it was far more a rigid issue for us on a daily basis in those sort of meetings. But it's, as I say, I think we're doing quite well as a Lincolnshire fund. The pension dashboard, well, that seems to be being pushed a little bit into the long grass at the moment, but I'm assured that West Yorkshire is still looking to attain the original deadline of September next year. And equally, the good news is that the annual report and accounts are looking to go, they're going to be signed off, even though they're a little bit late. We are going to get an unqualified assurances from that. So I think that we've got pretty good news in general through what we're hearing. So assurances gained by the board, and we considered that the TPR's code was very good. We're a bit disappointed with the KPIs and the performance measures that are sort of being reported to us. I think in particular, the ones that I find a little bit disconcerting is some of it's the death benefit ones that I fear that are not being met as or the focus isn't being met as it should be. The data issues, well, I know there is a recovery plan in place that West Yorkshire are going to deal with, so we're happy with that. And if I may say, the external auditor and that in giving an unqualified report, we're very satisfied with that. So in overall terms, I think it's good news. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dave. Questions? Yes, Mark?
Thank you, Chairman. It's quite a positive report from the board, and thank you very much for it. When I read the paper, I was concerned about the administration elements of the reporting, particularly the KPI ones, and particularly the KPIs that you've raised, because death in service and those sorts of things need to be dealt with quickly, because they are quite important to the families of the pensioner that should be. Chairman, we've raised this frequently through this session of the committee, because I've raised it personally a number of times, and I think the committee ought to be asking not necessarily the same questions, because we've asked us questions about what is the resourcing plan and when are resources going to be brought into it. And indeed, we've raised issues about taking on other clients, if that's going to dilute the response that we actually get from West Yorkshire. So I do think we ought to be putting some pressure on the administrator now to actually say, you know, what are they actually going to do? Because we've heard this response about it's a question of resources, and we are going through recruitment processes and so on, but this has appeared time and time again, and I think we really need something a bit more concrete than just promises.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, obviously the report on item 6, you may wish to refer back to that eventually, but Joe.
Yeah, if I could just come in on that. It is something that we've asked a lot, and we've actually got the resource plan coming to the collaboration board, which I think the meeting's next week. But it might be something that you ask for the resource plan to be brought to the next Admin and Governance Pensions Committee, which will be in January.
Chairman, could we do exactly that, so that we not only just have the comments made, but there's something put to us that actually shows it's going to be addressed, and there's something there that's meaningful in terms of doing that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure Joe will add it to the agenda for the next meeting. Thank you. Any other questions? No, thank you. Well, the report recommendation was that the committee considers and notes the report. Are we happy to agree to that? Please show. Thank you, that's carried. And thank you, Dave, for your report. Thank you. Moving on, item 5, pension fund update report. Over to you, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So this is the standard quarterly update paper, and the recommendations here are that the committee consider and discuss the report and agree whether any action or additional information is required. The key points I'd like to highlight from it are on the funding level and the change in the funding basis, which is set out alongside the reasons and impacts in paragraph 1.11 on page 18. This has been done to ensure that prudence is maintained in the valuation model and to keep the relative return expectations across asset classes consistent. This has caused around a 5% drop in the funding position, but we do still remain over 100% funded. Paragraph 2.2 on page 19 just reminds those members who haven't yet completed the Pension Regulators Toolkit that this is required within 6 months of joining the committee, and a link to the training was included within Monday's weekly email. If anyone has any difficulties, though, please do get in contact. Paragraphs 5.8 to 5.12 provide some background information on a change to how Border to Coast is going to be funded that will be going through the governance process in the next few months. The key points that I'd like to bring out here, because there is quite a lot of information in the paper, just that this change in funding methods was always expected to happen, and it's just being brought forward a year than originally planned at the request of the partner funds. Border to Coast have worked with funds to propose the new approach. This isn't something that's just being done to us. We've worked together in this. And basically, the cost of the funds will be based on actual assets under management rather than the fund's strategic benchmark allocations, which is what was done since the creation of the company to ensure it was adequately funded as we were transitioning into the vehicles. And this isn't an increase in costs, it's just actually a fairer way of allocating it and is actually the industry standard. So this will involve some changes to fund documentation and the shareholder agreement, and once everything is finalised, the amended shareholder agreement will be brought to the committee for approval, as was agreed at full council in February, that anything that isn't material can be agreed now by the Pensions Committee rather than having to go back through full council. Section 6 gives an update on the annual report and accounts. We were hoping to have some good news today that the 21-22 accounts had been signed off, but unfortunately that hasn't happened. So I'm just going to hand over to Andrew just to give an update on where we are with that.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Chairman. I think there are plenty of twin-hatted members on the Audit Committee here, so this won't be, it's relatively new news because we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but we are in the final throes of 2021-22. The auditors, as it stands at the moment, are just having a double-check process through some issues that have come up through the 22-23 audit. We did talk in the last Audit Committee that there was a risk whilst 22-23 audit is going on that 21-22 will still be at risk of being signed off, but we're hoping we are in the last week or so of that process. As the paper also sets out, we expect the 22-23 accounts, as it stands at the moment, to be signed off by the end of this calendar year. So that's the update on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Joe, back to you.
Thank you, yeah. Just on the conference and training at section 7, there are notes attached from the LGC conference in Leeds that was at the beginning of September. And 2 weeks ago, we had the Border to Coast annual conference, which was attended by some of us. But I think, Councillor Briggs, would you like to add your thoughts on the conference?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I made some brief notes whilst at the meeting. All positive, what I felt were positive thoughts. High returns equals high volatility. On past trends, equities are more safe. Diversification could show potential pitfalls. Long-term allocation, 10 years, steady partnership with Border to Coast. Deglobalisation, decarbonisation, demographics, digitalisation, key investment are takeaways. Strong balance sheet. It's difficult to raise capital with a weak balance sheet. Awareness of worldwide circumstances. Value stability. Inflation is a scary factor. Productivity is a good indicator. It was surprising to hear that India was only mentioned once at the conference. There's a power of engagement. It was good to hear share information, influence escalation, long-term scale, resources, local emerging markets, tenacity, accountable, impactable, confidence and knowledge of circumstances concerning ongoing updates. Border to coast perspective, building a future together, forward planning, effective communication, demonstrating ambition is important, to be adaptable, flexible, and have determination and investing in people. These were the positive thoughts that I gained from a most enjoyable experience at the conference. I went as the chairman's apprentice and was well received, and if possible I would recommend that if you possibly could, to try and attend a future conference. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if there's anything else anyone's attended that they would just like to briefly mention before I finish.
Yes, I would like to just add to Alan's comments there. It was a good conference. Theresa Clay, the minister, gave a talk, and speaking to sort of my peers from the other counties, what she was asking for was full transition by 2025. And a lot of them thought that was unobtainable. I think we'll be okay. I think Border to Coast are on track for that. And there was other mentions about the amount of assets under management that we would need. The figure was talked about, £50 billion moving up to 100 billion in the future. We're at just over 40 billion at the moment. But by 2025, if all transitions take place, then we should hit 50 billion anyway. So we'll have met the government's initial requirements on that. She didn't sound very upbeat, to be honest, but we can take out of that what we may. But yeah, it was a good conference. I echo Alan's comments on that. Yeah, back to you, Joe.
Thank you. The final thing I just wanted to mention is we had a brief discussion at the end of the last committee about the Lola training, and David Walker from Hymans Robertson was going to take that feedback back to Hymans. I was asked whether the committee, or I'd like to ask whether the committee would find it useful to set aside some additional time to go through some of that Lola training together. There is a year to complete it, so we have till August next year. Everyone has to go through those 8 modules, and then anything new that comes up. But I would be happy to organise something if members wanted to go through it together, if they felt that that would be more useful. So I'll finish there, and I'll happily take any questions and comments on that. Thank you.
Yeah, hold that thought, because we did discuss it briefly for those that were at our last meeting. I know you weren't, Phil, but I think it would be useful to, with the exception of Councillor Allen, who has done all 8 modules, and we've got to commend him on that. If you want, it would be a separate meeting to the normal pensions committee, if you want to go through it collectively with Joe and perhaps Hymans Robertson in attendance, so that you know, we can kill it all in one go if you wish. What's your feelings, especially new members? Mark, do you want to come in first, and then I'll bring you in, Steve?
So I can give you some benefits of my experience on it. It took me about an afternoon, because I did it straight after the pensions committee. and finished about 6 o'clock. It really is just a question of ploughing through it. It's not particularly difficult. It's not particularly, the test that you do is not particularly difficult either. And if you get answers wrong, you can go back and have another go and get the answers right. But it really is a question. But unfortunately, you can't get to the questions until you actually go through the presentation. So you have to sit there and listen to, generally something about 10 minutes, occasionally about 15 minutes. But it really is just a question of ploughing through it. If it makes it easier to book time, in the chamber to go through it or whatever it is, and then people have actually, guaranteed the time to do it, that might be easier. But it really is just a question of sitting in front of a screen and getting on with it.
Yeah. Councillor Stephen Bunny.
Thank you, Chair. I was feeling that the discipline of having a session in the chamber with others might well be the advantage, and I would welcome that.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I've got 2 modules to go. Tom?
Thank you, Chairman. Certainly on the, as you say, to help book time, it is very helpful because as you know, my time constraints, as we've discussed previously, you can be pulled from pillar to post, whereas at least if I'm here, I can say categorically, no, I can't do that, I'm here, and I have a justifiable way of saying, no, I really can't do that for you, I have to do it another time. So for me, personally, it would be a very big help.
So could I just have a show of hands who would like to do that and have a separate meeting booked by Joe? Yeah, it looks like the majority anyway. So Joe, if you make a note of that and perhaps think about dates and etc. Okay, thank you all. Back to you, Joe.
I had nothing more to say unless there's any other questions on any other areas of the report.
I've got, sorry, Dave, yes?
All I was going to suggest is that we want to get the members of the pension board as well to join. I mean, that would be my thoughts, Chairman.
It seems a very good idea, quite honestly, yes, and use that time fully. Thank you for that. I've just got 2 things I want to say. Well, 3 really. Obviously, we had our Border to Coast annual conference just a couple of weeks ago, and that was well attended, as it says in the report, by members of the committee. Very good conference. I would strongly recommend that next year, we're not exactly sure where it will be. It may well be in Leeds again, maybe in a different hotel this time and a different venue. But I strongly recommend that you try and attend that, because you will learn an awful lot. It's part of your CPD, really, and you really can learn a lot from these annual conferences and enjoy things as well. Secondly, really is 3 things I need to say. The LAPFF, which is the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum, which we're all signed up to, it takes place in Bournemouth from the 6th to the 8th of December. It throws up a problem for us members of the council, because the 8th of December is always the full council meeting. And although I did attend the very first one, and that was way back 6 years ago, I think, I did ask the leader for dispensation not to make the meeting. It didn't, voting-wise, it wouldn't make much difference. But the thing is, I'm certainly not going to miss them from now on, and it will have to be your choice. Otherwise, you would have to come back on the Thursday evening, and that sort of breaks the conference up quite a lot. I'll leave that to you. And lastly, the LGPS, Local Government Pension Scheme, Governance Conference in York is the 18th to the 19th of January coming up. If you do want to book, get through Democratic Services, through John, through Joe's office, and book it, because you need to book hotels, you need to book travel, whether you're driving or not. Just a point, I've been to this one before, and this train station, basically, you come out of the platform and walk straight into the hotel. It is as simple as that. It's literally a 30-second walk, if that. So that may be useful to you if you want to travel by train. I'll leave that alone now. Any questions or any comments on what Joe's... And we don't see any. So, right, we'll go back to the recommendations then. That committee is to consider and discuss the report and agree whether any action or additional information is required. Mark?
Sorry, Chairman, I'm late. Could I ask a question before you go to the...
Well, I did ask, did anybody want to ask a question?
I was still thinking whether I should raise the question when you said that.
That's probably why I started before you then, Mark. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. It was to do with the recosting arrangements. You said that there would be a report coming back to. I take it is a it doesn't. There's no more money going to Border and Coast, but it's a fairer share of the actual costs. When the paper comes to committee in terms of what it all means, can you ensure that we understand at this committee what our costs were and what the costs are going to be, so that we can see the difference?
Yeah, I can make sure that that's included. It won't be a definitive figure though, because it depends on the assets under management. So it's the market value that can move considerably, but I can give you an example at a snapshot in time.
Okay, thank you. Right, back to the recommendation on page 15. Could I have a show of hands that we agree with the recommendation? Please show. Thank you. That is carried. Moving on then, item 6, as you can see from your agenda sheet, it's to receive a report from Matt Mott, West Yorkshire Pension Fund. Obviously not here, so I'll hand over to you, Joe, to take this one.
Actually, we've got the admin people joining us through the Teams meeting, so we should be able to hand over to Lisa.
It's Lisa. Hiya. Thank you. Yeah, I'm here in place of Matt just to present the Pension Administration report for the last quarter. Obviously taking on board the comments made already about the key performance indicators, which I will go through as the first item on the report. Appreciate that the death, all the death KPIs are very important, and obviously when they show as not being met, there is obviously concern. A couple of ones, death on deferred and dependent setup, not met on the last quarter, but I can say since June and with the new staffing that we've got put into place and the training that's been done, we are starting to see an improvement on that area. And again, as part of the resource plan, which will go to collaboration board meeting next week and we'll bring to the meeting in January, there's lots of positives on the staffing and the training. It is a really complicated area to train on, but that seems to be proving to be really positive, and is because I do send the key performance indicators every month to Joe within a monthly report, can see that they are improving. With regards to showing that they haven't quite met, what is positive about that is that although they were kind of slow to be slightly processed, and that can be down to receiving information from beneficiaries, and just getting all the information we need to be able to pay the correct benefits to the correct people. They were paid on time. They did meet the next available payroll, so people weren't waiting a long time for the money. We were waiting in most cases for information from the beneficiaries for us to be able to set up the correct payments. With regards to some of the other KPIs, I'm not going to go through them all because there are reasons for, but say deferred benefits into payment quote, again, didn't meet, but we have had a significant increase on quotes to be provided, people looking to retire since they've got the deferred benefit statements this year. We have had a large increase in requests for quotes, people just looking to see if they can afford to retire. But on the positive, all payments have been made on time, so deferred benefits into payment are being made when a member's elected, retirements are going and being paid in time as well. So that kind of leads on to the staffing, which again I know is something that's been raised. So since this report was put together, again, lots of new staff in place, lots of training ongoing. We are still recruiting because we still do have vacancies that we haven't been able to fill. We do have people who are leaving and retiring, and in good places, people within the sections that are getting promoted to other areas and teams. So that then again leaves a gap that we need to fill. But very positive information from the teams that the training is going really well and is starting to have a positive impact on the work that is being produced. Just going to 2.3 shared service budget. Just to cover that, there looks like there's a slight decrease on the charge for 24-25, but more information will be provided on that as we go further on. With regards to 2.4, the shared service risk register, it was going to be mentioned in the meeting in September that we had the other, well, it was actually at the beginning of October. It didn't get brought as an agenda item to review the risk register, but will be definitely on the agenda for the November meeting. So I can come back to you with some further information about that in our January meeting. On the McLeod remedy under 2.5 policy changes, the regulations have now been passed and they came into force on the 1st of October 23. We're able to do the underpin as and when needed. We have validated our data since 2014 as we continued to ask for our changes and breaks in service. So we feel that our data is in a very good place. Lots of local government funds didn't ask for our changes and service breaks when care was introduced in 2014. So they're in a position where they do need to get that information, whereas we feel that the information we have is very accurate. If a member doesn't think it's accurate, they can obviously come to us and challenge what we have on our records. We will be sending communications to members, which is across all the three types, active, deferred and pensioner, via a newsletter. But we're also in discussion with the LGA about how we can let members know. We feel via our newsletter it is a good way to do it. But we're just checking with LGA if that's appropriate. We do need to let members know by the 31st of December on the change, the regulatory change. We get 3 months after the regulations have been laid. So the newsletter is the autumn winter newsletter that goes out kind of October, end of October, November time. So that's in good time for the 31st of December. The only other item I'd like to, on the policy changes, is a shared service refresh. The meeting went ahead with all the shared service partners and a draft document is being put together by Matt with the amendments that were discussed. This will be sent then back to each shared service partner to review, and we'll be sending it to our legal services to check that it also meets the requirements. I don't know, Joe, if you want to give any other update on that meeting, because I wasn't there, but obviously you and Matt were both in attendance.
Yeah, I'll just add, if I might, that actually it was a really useful meeting. There were representatives from Barnet, Hounslow, and obviously myself from Lincolnshire, with Eunice, who you'll remember from previous meetings, and Matt. We went through page by page the original shared service collaboration agreement that was created when we first set up the shared service back in 2014. So there was a lot of it that was actually not particularly relevant to an ongoing shared service. So I think one of the key things that we agreed to do was separate out an onboarding document to an ongoing shared service agreement. There are a lot of useful updates that we've hopefully put in there. Once it's gone through Bradford's legal, it will then come back to the other shared service partners for us to go through our legal to make sure that we are also content with what's in there. And the idea is that it is then a one-size document for all shared service partners, so anybody coming in when resources allow would sign up to that same agreement. So at the moment they're not identical across the shared service partners, however we get very similar services. So I think it's been really beneficial having that day's meeting to look at that, and look forward to hearing back. I think I've asked for an update at the collaboration board where they are with pulling that together. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for West Yorkshire? Yes, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. The risk analysis bit is quite important, obviously, in terms of warning us and guiding us in terms of what the underlying situation is. Could it just be rationalised across the actual paper, because we have Roman numeral 1, 2, 3 and 4 and actual numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4 in the actual listing, and I have a feeling that the risk ones doesn't match the graph or the table. I don't know whether it's a graph or a table on page 52.
Yeah, I think Lisa can take that back and just look at the formatting of that for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Because I think 1 it should be C3, and whether it's a 3 numeral or a 3 Roman, I'll leave it up to you to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Thank you, committee. Thank you for your report, Lisa. The recommendation is that the committee discuss the activity and performance of the administration service during the last quarter. I think we've done that. So can I have a show of hands that we agree with the recommendation? Please show. Thank you. That is carried. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Lisa. Moving on, item 7 then is the Risk Register Annual Review. Over to you, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So the recommendations on this paper are to review and approve the risk management policy and to review and approve the risk register. There haven't been any changes to the risk management policy since last year, which is attached to Appendix A. And following the full review that we did last year on the risk register, which is at Appendix B, there haven't been any material changes there. Any new risks or changes in scoring we bring to the committee as part of the quarterly fund update paper, so you'll be aware of any small changes over the year. I think the main change that it's worth mentioning is just that was raised at the last meeting is on risk P1, loss of key staff, where we had a long-term absence and lack of resources, and that was causing us a major concern. Well, I'm pleased to say that we are currently recruiting to 2 new posts, and the closing date is this Sunday. So hopefully we'll be moving forward to a point in the new year there. And more pleased to say that actually my colleague has now returned to the team. So we've put this risk now back to limited, whereas it was substantial in July. So we are progressing there. Paragraph 4 on page 65 just sets out the risks that are included within the risk register. Across the areas of governance, investments and funding, operational risks and people. I didn't plan on going through any risks, but I'll happily take any questions or comments, or if there are any risks you think are missing, please let me know and we can look to add those. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Questions? Comments? None seen. Thank you. Well, the recommendations on page 65, if I can have approval of those, please show. Thank you, that is carried. Moving on, item 8, Performance Measurement Annual Report. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the annual performance measurement report, looking at the longer term performance as measured by the fund's custodian Northern Trust, and also how the fund compares to the average LGPS fund in the PERC local authority universe. The recommendation here is that the committee consider and discuss the report and agree whether any action or additional information is required. The key points I'd like to raise against this report are the longer term performance of 10 years shows that the fund returning 7.5% per annum, which actually matches the benchmark and is ahead of both RPI and public sector average earnings. On the attribution, asset allocation was positive over the last year, and the underweight position to property was the largest contributor there. Stock selection was negative overall, but the largest positive contributor there was the Border to Coast Global Equity Alpha Fund, which has previously suffered some difficulties, so that was good news to see that performing well. The fund is overweight equities, underweight bonds when compared to the local authority universe, but changes have been agreed to the fund's strategic asset allocation to reduce the equity exposure and increase the multi-asset credit and private markets. So we'll look quite different next year once that's been done. And whilst there's always the caveat about apples and pears when comparing other LGPS funds' performance to our own, the table at paragraph 4.9 sets out how Lincolnshire compares with the universe average and the ranking in percentile terms. And in 1, 3 and 5 years, we show as 15th percentile, and at 10 years, we're 36. So I think that's a positive performance for the Lincolnshire Fund. That's all I was going to say, but I will happily take any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Questions? None seen. Yes, Mark.
In ranking, what's the total number of funds that we're comparing with?
I think it was 16. It says on the report. Let me just find
or ranking percentile, if you would need to explain what that means, as opposed to a ranking in terms of comparing to other funds.
So yeah, it's just split out across the top percentiles. So often in investment management, you look at top quartile funds, so the top 25%. So they just do this in a similar way. But there were 63 funds overall in the local authority universe, and that covers £243 billion of assets.
And we're at the 36th percentile, is that what you're saying there in the table?
Yes, over the longer term.
So
so we're
around the top third?
Yes.
Or the bottom of the top third?
Yes.
Right, I understand now.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. I read this part in the report with interest and thought, if we're told basically, as we all know, that each fund has different modus operandi and different needs and different risk remits, you can't really rank that in the traditional and even the investment sense of the word. So isn't it partially slightly misleading in some respects, because we are in a fortunate position at the moment. We are fully funded, so our risk appetite, and we are not expecting suddenly all our staff to disappear tomorrow. So our risk appetite will be lower than, say, another council who have a larger number of staff who are about to retire and think, oh, well, we're having problems recruiting. We may end up losing a lot more staff through voluntary turnover. So their risk appetite's higher, which means they take greater risk, which can have a reward, but can also have a negative. So how do you fairly compare between that sort of scenario and our fortunate scenario, if you will?
You're absolutely right, Tom. And if we were 89th percentile, I'd probably not mention it. But it's always been raised. There are some funds, I think there's one particular London fund, I don't know if they still are, but they were 100% equities. So they would either ever be top or bottom, depending upon how equities performed at a particular time. So it is a bit of a nonsense, but as with most things local authority, they like to compare. Government likes to see comparisons. So the universe has been going for, it used to be run by WM Company, it's been going for decades. And at the beginning of that, when that was first set up, the asset allocations were much more similar. People had one or two balance managers, and it was all very similar. As the strategies have got more complicated and more complex, and we've moved away and looked to better, match is the wrong word, but better align them to our liabilities and to our risk appetites, then that's diverged a lot. So absolutely, it isn't the most useful thing in the world, but it's kind of one of the only comparators we have at this point in time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, take you back to the recommendation on page 79. Can we have a show of hands that we agree with the recommendation? Show, thank you, that's carried. Moving on then, thank you, Joe. Moving on to item 9, which is consideration of exempt information. I'll read it out as I usually do. In accordance with section 100A4 of the Local Government Act of 1972, the following agenda item has not been circulated to the press and public on the grounds that it is considered to contain exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. The press and public may be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of this item of business. Over to you, Tom.
Sorry, just a vote to agree.
Yeah. Can we have a show of hands that we agree with exempt the public and press? Thank you. That's carried. We'll just give you a moment to make sure